Parrot notices abandoned baby at gas station. What he said left everyone shocked. Please listen until the end to be amazed by this story. The summer heat bore down on Whitney's gas and grocery like an oppressive blanket, turning the rural roadside station into a shimmering mirage against the endless stretch of highway. The air conditioner wheezed and sputtered, struggling against temperatures that had the asphalt parking lot radiating waves of heat. Most days, the station saw only a handful of travelers stopping for fuel and refreshments, making it a quiet outpost on the long road between cities. Whitney Jenkins leaned against the counter, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, wiping sweat from her brow. She had inherited the station from her father years ago, transforming the once dingy store into a cleaner, more welcoming stop for weary travelers. Among her additions was Sally, an African grey parrot whose elegant cage stood near the front window, providing both company and entertainment during the slow hours. Sally was no ordinary bird. With striking grey feathers accented by a vibrant red tail, she had an uncanny ability to mimic sounds and words, often surprising customers with her intelligent commentary. Whitney had rescued the bird after her previous owner passed away, giving her a second chance at a happy life. Over time, they'd developed a bond that went beyond simple pet and owner. Sally was Whitney's companion, and in the quiet hours of the rural station, sometimes her only conversation partner. "If going to be another slow day," Whitney sighed, refilling Sally's water dish. The parrot tilted her head, studying Whitney with a knowing eye. Slow day," Sally repeated, her voice a perfect imitation of Whitney's resigned tone. The morning passed like countless others before it, a few truckers stopping for coffee, locals picking up forgotten groceries, and the occasional tourist asking for directions. Whitney moved through these interactions with practiced ease, her warm smile never revealing the financial struggles that kept her awake at night. Running an independent station was becoming increasingly difficult, with the large chains expanding their reach. Shortly after midday, when the heat reached its peak, a sleek black car pulled into the station. It was expensive, the kind rarely seen in these parts, its tinted windows reflecting the harsh sunlight. Whitney watched through the window as the driver, a man wearing sunglasses despite the car's dark interior, filled the tank. There was something about his hurried movements that caught her attention, a tension in his shoulders that seemed out of place. Sally noticed too. The parrot had stopped preening her feathers and was now focused intently on the parking lot, her head bobbing slightly as she tracked the man's movements. The stranger entered the store, his expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. He was strikingly handsome, with sharp features and perfectly styled hair, but his eyes darted nervously around the small space. "Just the gas on pump 3, he said, sliding a credit card across the counter. "Of course," Whitney replied, processing the payment. "Long drive ahead?" The man barely acknowledged her question with a curt nod. His phone rang, and he turned away to answer it in hushed tones. Whitney caught fragments of the conversation, something about being almost there and taking care of everything. As the man signed the receipt, Sally suddenly let out an unusual sound, a perfect imitation of a baby's cry, so realistic that both Whitney and the stranger froze. "Did you hear that?" Whitney asked, glancing toward the back of the store, thinking perhaps a customer with an infant had entered without her noticing. The man's face paled slightly. "Just your bird," he said dismissively, though his eyes lingered on Sally for a moment too long. "Thanks," he added abruptly before turning and walking swiftly out of the store. Whitney watched through the window as he returned to his car. Instead of getting in, however, he opened the back door for just a moment, too briefly for Whitney to see inside, then quickly closed it again. After a final glance toward the store, he slid into the driver's seat and pulled away with unusual haste, gravel spraying from beneath his tires. "Strange guy," Whitney murmured, turning back to Sally, who had gone uncharacteristically quiet. The next hour passed slowly. The heat seemed to intensify, keeping potential customers on the road rather than stopping. Whitney was restocking the cooler when Sally began to make that sound again, the crying baby. But this time, it was more insistent, almost distressed. "What has gotten into you today?" Whitney asked, approaching the cage. Sally was pacing back and forth on her perch, agitated in a way Whitney had never seen before. The bird's eyes kept darting to the window, toward the parking lot. "Baby! Baby!" Sally squawked suddenly, the words crystal clear despite never having been taught this phrase. A chill ran down Whitney's spine despite the heat. Sally had an extensive vocabulary, learned from Whitney and customers over the years, but this was new, and there was something in the Parrot's tone, an urgency that didn't sound like simple mimicry. Whitney moved to the window, scanning the nearly empty parking lot. Nothing seemed out of place. The black car was long gone, and only 2 other vehicles remained. A pickup truck belonging to her part-time employee who was on break, and a dusty sedan that had been abandoned near the edge of the property weeks ago. Just as she was about to turn away, Sally shrieked again, "Baby, hot baby!" Whitney's gaze returned to the parking lot, more carefully this time. The abandoned sedan sat baking in the sun, its faded blue paint peeling from years of exposure. It had become such a fixture that she hardly noticed it anymore, planning to have it towed once she could afford the expense. Sally's wings flapped against her cage bars. "Baby! Hot car! Baby!" An awful suspicion formed in Whitney's mind. She grabbed her phone and rushed outside into the scorching heat. The asphalt burned through her thin-soled shoes as she approached the old sedan, her heart pounding with each step. Cupping her hands against the window, she peered inside. At first she saw nothing but the typical debris of a long-abandoned vehicle, fast food wrappers, empty bottles, dust covering every surface. But then a slight movement caught her eye, coming from something on the back seat, partially covered by a thin blanket. Whitney tried the door, locked. She moved to the other side, trying each handle in turn, but found them all secured. Through the window, she could now clearly make out what appeared to be a baby carrier, positioned on the back seat out of view from casual passers-by. "Hello?" she called out, tapping on the glass. "Is anyone in there?" A weak cry answered her, not Sally's imitation, but a real baby's cry, feeble and distressed in the stifling heat of the sealed car. Whitney didn't hesitate. She ran back to the station, grabbed the emergency hammer she kept behind the counter, and rushed back to the sedan. With a silent apology to the car's owner, she smashed the rear window, carefully clearing away the shattered glass before reaching inside to unlock the door. The wave of hot air that escaped when she opened the door was suffocating. Inside the carrier, wrapped in a light blanket despite the heat, was a baby boy. His tiny face was flushed red, his sparse hair damp with sweat. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow, and his movements weak. "Oh my God," Whitney whispered, carefully lifting the carrier out of the car. The baby couldn't have been more than a few months old. His skin was hot to the touch and his little body seemed to radiate heat. She quickly carried him into the air-conditioned store, her mind racing. Inside, she placed the carrier on the counter and unwrapped the blanket from around the baby. His clothes were soaked with sweat, his diaper heavy. As she worked to cool him down, she noticed a small envelope tucked into the side of the carrier. But the baby's condition took priority. She'd look at that later. "Zach!" she called out to her employee, who emerged from the back room, his sandwich still in hand. "Call 911 now! Tell them we have an abandoned baby suffering from heat exposure." Zach's eyes widened at the sight of the infant, but he pulled out his phone immediately and made the call, relaying information as Whitney used a damp cloth to gently cool the baby's feverish skin. Sally watched from her cage, oddly silent now, her intelligent eyes fixed on the small form on the counter. "Who would leave a baby in this heat?" Zach asked, hanging up the phone. "Ambulance is on the way. They said to keep cooling him down slowly." Whitney nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she continued her efforts. "I think it was that man in the black car," she said. "Sally was trying to tell me something when he was here. She kept making baby crying sounds." As if on cue, Sally spoke again, but what she said next sent ice through Whitney's veins, despite the suffocating heat of the day. "Daddy leaving. Daddy saying, 'Goodbye, Gabriel. Better off without me.'" Whitney and Zach stared at the parrot, then at each other. "Did she just—" Zach began. "She has been mimicking all day," Whitney said, though uncertainty tinged her voice. She must have heard something. The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a weak cry. Whitney turned her attention back to the infant, gently stroking his cheek. It's okay, little one. Help is coming. Only then did she reach for the envelope in the carrier. Inside was a handwritten note, the ink smudged in places as if tears had fallen on the paper. His name is Gabriel. I can't do this anymore. Please find someone who will love him better than we could. Do not try to find me. There was no signature, no additional information, just this desperate plea from a parent at the end of their rope. In the distance, the wail of an approaching ambulance cut through the heavy summer air. Whitney held Gabriel close, whispering reassurances to the abandoned child who had entered her life in such a dramatic way. Sally watched from her perch, her eyes never leaving the baby. Then, in a voice so human it was startling, she said words that would haunt Whitney for days to come. Mother crying, father lying, baby dying. The Parrot's uncanny statement hung in the air as the ambulance pulled into the parking lot, its lights painting the small store in alternating flashes of red and white. Whatever had happened here today, Whitney knew instinctively that it was far more complicated and possibly more sinister than a simple case of abandonment. As paramedics rushed in, taking control of Gabriel's care with practiced efficiency, Whitney found herself looking back at Sally. The parrot had fallen silent again, but her gaze remained fixed on the baby with an intensity that seemed almost human in its concern. What had this bird witnessed, and what dark secrets lay behind the abandonment of baby Gabriel on this scorching summer day? The answers would prove more disturbing than Whitney could possibly imagine. Officer Zach Thompson arrived at Whitney's gas and grocery while the paramedics were still stabilizing Gabriel. With his broad shoulders and steady demeanor, Zach brought a sense of calm to the chaotic scene. He'd been the first to respond to the emergency call, recognizing the address immediately since he moonlighted at the station on his days off from the police force. "I need to see exactly where you found him," Zach said, pulling Whitney aside as the medical team prepared to transport Gabriel to the nearest hospital. Whitney led him to the abandoned sedan, explaining how Sally's strange behavior had alerted her to check the vehicle. The sun had begun its descent, but the car's interior still radiated heat like an oven. "How long has this car been here?" Zach asked, snapping photos of the vehicle's exterior and license plate. "Weeks," Whitney replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I assumed it was abandoned. It was here when I opened one morning, and no one ever came to claim it." Zach's expression hardened as he peered through the broken window. "And you were certain it was empty until today?" Whitney nodded. "I checked the lot every night before closing. That car was definitely empty yesterday evening." As they spoke, the paramedics wheeled Gabriel past them toward the waiting ambulance. The baby looked tiny on the stretcher, an oxygen mask covering most of his face, IV lines already inserted into his little arm. "He's stabilizing," one paramedic reported, "but he's severely dehydrated. We need to get him to Children's Hospital immediately." Whitney felt a surge of protectiveness watching Gabriel being loaded into the ambulance. "I am coming with him," she declared, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. The paramedic hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but stay out of the way if things get critical." Before climbing into the ambulance, Whitney turned to Zach. "Sally, my parrot." She said something strange. She mimicked a man saying, "Goodbye, Gabriel, better off without me." And then she said, "Mother crying, father lying, baby dying." I think she was repeating things she heard. Zach's eyebrows rose. "Your parrot is a witness?" "I know it sounds crazy, but Sally is incredibly intelligent. She doesn't just mimic randomly. She understands context. And she's never said any of these things before today." The ambulance driver called impatiently, and Whitney made a quick decision. "My neighbor Elaine has a key to the shop. Call her to take care of Sally while I am gone. And Zach, talk to Sally. Record what she says. I think she knows more than we do." With that, Whitney climbed into the ambulance, her hand automatically reaching for Gabriel's tiny fingers as the doors closed behind her. The siren wailed to life and they pulled away, leaving Zach standing in the parking lot with a thoughtful expression. Back inside the gas station, Zach approached Sally's cage cautiously. The parrot eyed him with what seemed like suspicion, her head tilting as she assessed this familiar human in his unfamiliar police uniform. "Hello, Sally," Zach said, feeling slightly foolish talking to a bird as if interviewing a witness. He pulled out his phone and began recording. Can you tell me what you saw today? Sally remained silent, preening her feathers with apparent disinterest. Zach tried again. Sally, who left the baby? The parrot stopped preening and fixed Zach with an unsettlingly intelligent gaze. Black car man. Daddy leaving. Goodbye, Gabriel. A chill ran down Zach's spine despite the store's failing air conditioning. The bird's mimicry was eerily accurate, capturing not just words, but tone and inflection. And what about the mother? Zach prompted. Sally shifted on her perch, agitated. Mother crying on phone. Jack, don't do this. Bring him back. Zach's pulse quickened. A name. The bird had provided an actual name. Jack, the father's name is Jack. Jack angry. Jack saying, your fault, Iris, your fault. 2 names now, Jack and Iris, along with what sounded like a domestic dispute. Zach wrote quickly in his notepad, hardly believing he was taking witness testimony from a parrot. When did you hear this, Sally? Today. The bird bobbed her head in what looked remarkably like a nod, then continued her recitation. Jack saying, too much, can't handle, better off adopted. Mother crying, father lying, baby dying. Zach's phone buzzed with an incoming call, breaking the strange interview. It was dispatch with information on the car's registration. The sedan was registered to an Iris Montgomery, reported stolen 3 days ago in Riverside County. While this information processed, Elaine arrived, a grandmotherly woman with silver hair and gentle hands, to take charge of the shop and Sally. Zach briefed her quickly, emphasizing the importance of recording anything else Sally might say. That bird always did understand more than she let on, Elaine remarked, settling behind the counter like she belonged there. Whitney rescued her from a home where she witnessed, well, let us just say Sally, as previous owner, had a troubled marriage. The bird became withdrawn after seeing too many fights. This information cast Sally's behavior in a new light. Perhaps the parrot was especially attuned to domestic conflicts because of her past. Zach left Elaine with instructions to call immediately if Sally revealed anything else, then headed to the hospital where Gabriel had been taken. His mind was already constructing a narrative. A troubled couple, a father named Jack who had decided to abandon their baby, possibly against the mother's wishes. But why here, at this isolated gas station? And why in an already abandoned car registered to the mother? At Children's Hospital, Zach found Whitney in the waiting room, her face drawn with worry. How is he? He asked. Stabilized, Whitney replied. They re-treating him for dehydration and heat exposure. The doctor says if he'd been in that car much longer. She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. We've identified the car's owner, Zach said, a woman named Iris Montgomery. The car was reported stolen 3 days ago. Whitney's eyes widened. Stolen? But Sally mentioned that name, Iris. She said Jack was blaming Iris for something. I know. I spoke with Sally too, Zach confirmed, showing Whitney the recording on his phone. She gave us 2 names, Jack and Iris. This isn't just abandonment, Whitney. There is more going on here. A doctor approached them, interrupting their conversation. Dr. Helen Rivera was striking even in her rumpled scrubs, her dark hair pulled back from her face, eyes sharp with intelligence and concern. Are you the woman who found the baby? She asked Whitney directly. Whitney nodded. How is he? Out of danger, Dr. Rivera replied, but I have concerns beyond his physical condition. She gestured for them to follow her to a more private corner of the waiting room. This child shows signs of previous neglect, minor but noticeable. He is underweight for his age, has some diaper rash that predates today, and shows signs of previous dehydration. You was re-saying this is not the first time he has been in danger, Zach said, his police training clicking into gear. Dr. Rivera nodded grimly. Exactly. And there is something else. We found traces of a mild sedative in his system, not enough to be dangerous, but enough to keep him quiet for several hours. Someone deliberately drugged this baby. The implications hit Whitney like a physical blow. They wanted him to stay quiet in the car, she whispered, horror dawning on her face. They didn't just abandon him. They made sure he wouldn't to cry out for help. That is my assessment as well, Dr. Rivera agreed. I've already reported my findings to Child Protective Services. Zach's phone rang again. This time it was Elaine, her voice tinged with excitement. Sally S. been talking up a storm since you left, she reported. She keeps repeating a conversation. You need to hear this. Elaine held her phone up to Sally S. Cage, and the Parrot S. voice came through clearly. Jack saying, "The money or the baby disappears." Iris crying, Jack laughing. "Rich family will pay. Always wanted child." Whitney and Zach exchanged shocked glances as the implications sank in. This wasn't simply a case of abandonment. It was extortion, or possibly even a botched kidnapping. "I need to contact Riverside County immediately," Zach said, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to find this Iris Montgomery and determine if she is a victim or an accomplice." While Zach made his calls, Whitney sat heavily in a waiting room chair trying to process what they were uncovering. Gabriel wasn't just an abandoned baby. He was potentially a pawn in some dark scheme involving extortion and threats. But who was the rich family Sally had referenced, and where were they now? The hospital corridor bustled with activity as the shift changed, nurses and doctors exchanging information in hushed professional tones. Through the window of the nursery, Whitney could see Gabriel sleeping peacefully in his crib, monitors tracking his vital signs, an IV still delivering fluids to his tiny body. Something fierce and protective swelled in her chest. Whatever was happening, this innocent child had been placed in her path, and she was determined to ensure his safety. Zach returned, his expression grim but determined. "Riverside County is sending over the original theft report, but I've already got preliminary information. Iris Montgomery isn't just anyone. She is the daughter of Harold Montgomery." "The real estate developer?" Whitney asked, recognizing the name from local news. Zach nodded. "Exactly. The family is extremely wealthy. Iris is his only daughter, and according to social media, she recently had a baby. The timing fits Gabriel A.'s age." "So this Jack person, what, he stole the car and the baby to extort money from the Montgomery family?" Whitney's voice rose with indignation. "That's my working theory," Zach confirmed. "But something went wrong. Maybe the family contacted police instead of paying. Maybe Jack panicked. Either way, he changed plans and decided to abandon Gabriel here, where he'd eventually be found, but not immediately. The sedative was to make sure Gabriel wouldn't attract attention too quickly." Whitney shuddered. "But why leave him in Iris's car? Why not just drop him at a hospital or fire station? There are safe haven laws." "That is the part I can't figure out yet," Zach admitted. "Unless—" His eyes narrowed in thought. "Unless Jack wanted to frame Iris for the abandonment. Make it look like she left her own baby to die." The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture more disturbing than either of them had initially imagined. A custody dispute turned criminal. A father willing to use his own child as leverage. A mother whose car and baby had been taken, possibly to frame her for neglect or worse. "We need to find Iris," Whitney said firmly. If Sally heard her crying on the phone, she might be in danger too. Before Zach could respond, the hospital's automatic doors slid open and a woman rushed in, her movements frantic, her beauty marred by terror and exhaustion. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her hair disheveled, and her eyes red from crying. "My baby," she was saying to the receptionist, her voice breaking. "My son was brought here. Gabriel Montgomery. Please, I need to see him." Whitney and Zach exchanged glances. Iris Montgomery had found them. Zach approached cautiously, his hand instinctively near his service weapon. "Ms. Montgomery, I'm Officer Thompson. We've been trying to locate you." Iris spun toward him, desperation etched on her face. "Where is my son? Is he alive? Please tell me he is alive. He is stable," Whitney interjected, stepping forward. "I found him. He is going to be okay." Relief flooded Iris's features, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank God," she whispered, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. Zach guided her to a chair, his professional demeanor softened by compassion. "Ms., "Montgomery, we need to ask you some questions," he said gently. "About Jack, about what happened." At the mention of Jackie's name, Iris' expression hardened, fear and anger replacing relief. He took Gabriel. "Stole my car. Said if my father didn't pay $2 million, I'd never see my baby again." Her voice shook with barely controlled fury. "Then he called saying he'd left Gabriel somewhere, that it was my fault, that I'd be blamed for abandoning him. I've been driving for hours, checking every hospital in a 100-mile radius." "How did you know to check here?" Whitney asked. "I didn't, Iris admitted. "But after Jack's last call, I managed to access my car GPS history through the manufacturer S app. This was the last location before the signal went dead." She looked between them, desperation returning to her eyes. "Please, can I see Gabriel now?" "Doctor." Rivera, who had been standing nearby listening, stepped forward. "First, we need to verify your identity. Hospital policy, especially in potential custody situations." Iris immediately pulled out her driver's license and phone, showing pictures of herself with Gabriel. "Please," she begged, "he is all I have." While Dr. Rivera examined the documentation, Whitney studied Iris' face, looking for any sign of deception. But all she saw was the raw anguish of a mother separated from her child, the same protective ferocity she herself had felt toward Gabriel since finding him. "There is something else," Whitney said quietly. "Something you should know. The person who alerted me to Gabriel's presence was my Parrot, Sally. She has been repeating conversations she must have overheard when Jack stopped at my gas station. She mentioned your name. And she said Jack was claiming the baby would be better off adopted and that a rich family will pay." Iris' face drained of color. "Oh, God," she whispered. "He was never going to give Gabriel back, even if my father paid. He was planning to sell him." The horrifying realization hung in the air between them. Jack hadn't just been extorting money from the Montgomery family. He had potentially been arranging an illegal adoption using Gabriel as merchandise. "Doctor," Rivera returned with a security officer. "Your identity checks out, Ms. Montgomery. You can see your son now, but this officer will accompany you for everyone's safety." As Iris was led away to the nursery, Zach pulled Whitney aside. This case just got more complicated. If Jack was arranging an illegal adoption, there are other people involved, people who are planning to buy a baby. And they might still be looking for Gabriel, Whitney realized, a chill running through her. "That is why you keeping security with them." Zach nodded grimly. "Until we find Jack and anyone he was working with, Gabriel and Iris remain at risk. And so do you, Whitney. You're a witness who can identify Jack." The weight of this statement settled over Whitney. She thought of her quiet gas station, of Sally in her cage by the window, of the normal life she'd been living just hours ago. Now she was entangled in a web of kidnapping, extortion, and possibly human trafficking, all because a parrot had been clever enough to alert her to a baby in danger. As if reading her thoughts, Zach squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "You saved Gabriel's life today. Whatever happens next, remember that." In the nursery, Iris stood over Gabriel's crib, tears streaming silently down her face as she gently stroked his cheek. The baby stirred, his eyes fluttering open to focus on his mother's face. Despite everything he'd endured, he recognized her, his tiny mouth curving into what might have been the beginning of a smile. Outside in the hallway, Whitney watched through the window, her heart aching with a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that Gabriel was safe and reunited with his mother, fear for what might still be coming, and beneath it all, a strange emptiness at the thought of saying goodbye to the baby she'd rescued. But the story was far from over. Jack was still out there, and according to Sally's disturbing revelations, so were the people who had been willing to buy a stolen baby, people who might not be happy about their plans being disrupted. As night fell over the hospital, the halls grew quieter, but the danger surrounding Gabriel and Iris Montgomery, and Whitney herself, was only beginning to emerge from the shadows. Darkness had settled over the hospital when Whitney finally stepped outside for some fresh air. The day's events weighed heavily on her mind as she leaned against the building's cool brick exterior. Gabriel was safe for now, with Iris keeping vigil by his side and a security officer stationed at the nursery door. Yet Whitney couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the eye of the storm. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elaine. "Sally 1T, stop talking about church people and baby payment." "Should I record it?" Whitney quickly replied affirmatively, her pulse quickening. Church people. What did that have to do with this situation? Before she could ponder this further, Zach emerged from the hospital, his face tight with concern. "I just got off the phone with my captain. We have a situation." "What is happening?" "Jack Moore has been found," Zach said grimly. "Dead in a motel about 30 miles from here. Single gunshot wound to the head. His phone was missing, but they found notes about Gabriel, along with a large sum of cash in the room safe." Whitney felt the blood drain from her face. He was killed? By whom? That is what we need to figure out. But it confirms one thing: Jack wasn't acting alone. Zach ran a hand through his hair in frustration. And now his accomplices know things haven't gone according to plan. Gabriel is still missing from where Jack left him, which means they'll be looking. A chill ran down Whitney's spine that had nothing to do with the night air. "You think they all come here? To the hospital?" "It is a possibility we can't ignore. I've requested additional officers, but it'll take time for them to arrive." Zach checked his watch. "We should get back inside." As they turned toward the entrance, Whitney's phone rang. Elaine again, her voice urgent. "Whitney, you need to hear this. Sally S. been saying the same thing over and over." Whitney put the phone on speaker so Zach could hear as well. In the background, Sally S.'s voice came through with disturbing clarity. "Church not real church, pastor not real pastor, Sunday special delivery." "She has been repeating that for 10 minutes, Elaine explained. "And there is more. She keeps saying, 'White van coming, payment ready.'" Zach and Whitney exchanged alarmed glances. "The Sunset Valley Community Church," Zach said suddenly. "It was just a few miles from your station. There was a news story last year. They were raising funds to build a new children's wing. A perfect cover for people trafficking children," Whitney realized, horror dawning on her face. "Elaine," Zach said into the phone, "is there security footage from the gas station? Cameras that might have caught Jack or anyone else interacting with Sally?" "Whitney has cameras," Elaine confirmed. "The monitor is in the back office. Want me to check?" "Yes, but be careful," Zach warned. "Don't let anyone know you re there alone. Lock the doors." As they hurried back inside the hospital, Zach was already calling for backup at both the church and the gas station. Whitney, meanwhile, found herself piecing together a terrifying picture. Jack kidnapping Gabriel, planning to extort money from Iris' family while simultaneously arranging to sell the baby through a fake church operation, then abandoning Gabriel when something went wrong, only to end up dead himself, presumably killed by his accomplices. They found Iris in the nursery, Gabriel asleep in her arms, the security officer standing vigilant by the door. Her eyes widened at their urgent expressions. "What has happened?" she whispered, instinctively holding Gabriel closer. "Ms. Montgomery," Zach began formally, "we have reason to believe your ex-husband was working with a network of child traffickers operating under the guise of a church. They may be looking for Gabriel, and they read dangerous enough to have killed Jack." Iris' face went ashen. "Oh, God," she breathed. "I should have known. Jack started getting involved with a new church a few months ago, right around the time our marriage fell apart. He said they were helping him find purpose." Her voice broke. "He changed so quickly, became secretive, started talking about how much money rich families would pay to adopt a baby like Gabriel." "Do you remember the name of the church?" Whitney asked gently. "Sunset Valley something," Iris replied, confirming their suspicions. "He took me there once. The pastor was so focused on their new children's wing. Looking back, there was something off about the whole place, but I was too caught up in trying to save our marriage to notice." Zach's phone buzzed with a text. "Security footage from the gas station," he said, showing Whitney the message from Elaine. A white van was parked behind the station while Jack was inside. 2 men in casual clothes, but one was wearing a clerical collar. They spoke to Jack briefly before he left. They were supervising him, Whitney realized, making sure he followed through with leaving Gabriel. And when they realized Gabriel had been found too quickly, they eliminated Jack, Zach concluded, tied up the loose end. The security officer at the door shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, maybe we should move them to a more secure location. If these people are as dangerous as you suggest." Zach nodded. "Say that is exactly what we were going to do, but not to another part of the hospital. That would be the first place they'd look." "Where then?" Iris asked, fear evident in her voice. Whitney spoke up with surprising conviction. "My place. The apartment above the gas station. It is the last place they'd expect, and I know every entry point. Plus, Sally is there. She seems to know more about what's happening than any of us." The security officer looked dubious, but Zach was already nodding. "It could work, especially if we make it look like they're being transferred to county hospital. Create a decoy." The plan came together quickly, while Zach arranged for a police escort and decoy transfer. Whitney and the security officer helped Iris gather what she needed for Gabriel. Hospital staff, understanding the gravity of the situation, provided necessary supplies and medication to ensure Gabriel's continued recovery. As they prepared to leave through a service entrance, Whitney's phone lit up with another message from Elaine. White van just drove slowly past the station, saw the broken window on the car. They re-looking. Whitney showed the message to Zach, whose jaw tightened. "They know Gabriel was found. We need to move now." Under cover of darkness, with 2 police cruisers as escorts, they slipped out of the hospital. Gabriel remained mercifully asleep in his carrier as they carefully transferred him to Zach's unmarked police vehicle. Iris sat in the back with her baby, while Whitney took the passenger seat, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The drive to the gas station took place in tense silence, all of them watching for the white van or any vehicle that might be following. They took a circuitous route, doubling back several times to ensure they weren't being tailed. Finally, they pulled up to the darkened station from the rear service road, lights off to avoid attention. Elaine met them at the back door, relief evident on her face. "Thank goodness you'd all safe," she whispered, ushering them inside and immediately locking the door behind them. Sally hasn't stopped talking. It's like she knows something big is about to happen. Indeed, as they entered the store, Sally's agitated movements in her cage were immediately apparent. The parrot paced back and forth, her feathers slightly raised in distress. "Van people coming," she screeched upon seeing them. "Bad pastor coming." How does she know this?" Iris whispered, clutching Gabriel's carrier close. "African Greys are incredibly intelligent," Whitney explained as she led them upstairs to her apartment. "Sally doesn't just mimic. She understands context, connects information. She's warning us because she has pieced together what is happening." The apartment above the gas station was small but neat, with large windows overlooking the highway. Whitney quickly closed all the blinds and turned on only the minimum lighting necessary. While Zach established a communication line with his fellow officers, Whitney showed Iris where to settle with Gabriel. "It has not much," Whitney apologized, indicating the spare bedroom she used mainly for storage. "But you will be safe here." Iris's hand caught Whitney's, squeezing it gratefully. "You saved my son's life," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "So I can never repay you for that." A sudden squawk from below interrupted their moment. Sally had been brought upstairs in her travel cage and was now perched in the living room, her intelligent eyes scanning the new environment. "Van here," the parrot announced suddenly. Van stopping. They all froze. Then Zach moved swiftly to the window, carefully peering through a slit in the blinds. Sure enough, a white van had pulled into the gas station's lot, moving slowly past the shuttered building with its lights off. "They rechecking to see if anyone's here," Zach murmured, his hand moving to his service weapon. "2 men in the front. Can to see if there are more in back." Whitney felt a surge of fear, but it was quickly replaced by anger. These people had drugged an innocent baby, left him to die in a hot car, and killed Jack when he became a liability. They weren't going to get away with it. "We need to draw them in," she said suddenly. "Make them think we found Gabriel." "That's too dangerous," Zach protested, but Whitney was already moving to the linen closet, pulling out an old baby blanket she'd kept from her niece's visits. "They don't know what Gabriel looks like," she explained, "just that he is a baby who was in that abandoned car. If they see movement in the store, a blanket that looks like it could be wrapping a baby, they might come in to investigate." And we'll be waiting. Zach considered this, then nodded slowly. My backup is still 10 minutes out. If we can keep them occupied until then. The plan was simple but risky. Whitney would return to the store level, make it appear as if someone was there with a baby, while Zach waited in ambush. Iris and Gabriel would remain safely upstairs with the security officer. Before heading downstairs, Whitney approached Sally S. Cage. "You've been trying to protect Gabriel all along, haven't you?" she asked softly. The Parrot tilted her head, studying Whitney with those intelligent eyes. "Baby safe," Sally replied, as if confirming Whitney's question. "Bad people no get baby." With renewed determination, Whitney descended to the store level, carefully arranging the baby blanket over a bundle of towels in a way that would be visible from the window, but still ambiguous enough to lure their targets inside. She then positioned herself behind the counter, out of sight but with a clear view of the entrance. Minutes passed in tense silence. The white van remained parked at the edge of the lot, its occupants clearly surveilling the location. Whitney's heart pounded so loudly she was sure it could be heard across the room. Then movement, a car door opening and closing softly, the silhouette of a man approaching the store, peering carefully through the windows. He was tall, well-dressed, with the unmistakable white collar of a clergyman, the pastor from Sunset Valley Community Church. He noticed the bundle Whitney had arranged, visible through the window. His posture changed, becoming more alert, more focused. He returned to the van briefly, then approached again with another man, heavyset with the build of someone accustomed to using physical intimidation. Whitney texted Zach. 2 men approaching, one dressed as pastor, one muscle. The reply came instantly. "Ready. Let them enter, then get clear." The lock on the front door was no match for the tools the men carried. They slipped inside with practiced efficiency, immediately moving toward the blanket-covered bundle. Whitney held her breath, waiting for the right moment to signal Zach. "It is not here," the fake pastor hissed to his companion. "Just blankets. Someone is playing games." "Check the back," the larger man replied, his voice unexpectedly cultured. The carrier was in the report. Maybe the baby S there. As they moved deeper into the store, Whitney sent the signal. "Now." Zach emerged from his hiding spot, weapon drawn. "Police! Hands where I can see them!" To us, what happened next unfolded with frightening speed. The larger man spun around, already reaching for something at his waistband. Zach fired a warning shot into the ceiling, causing both men to freeze momentarily. "Don't be stupid," Zach warned them. "Backup is already on the way, it is over." The fake pastor's face contorted with rage. "You have no idea what you dealing with," he snarled. "This goes beyond just one baby. We have people everywhere, hospitals, social services, adoption agencies." "Tell us about it," Whitney suggested, emerging from behind the counter. "Tell us about how you use the church as a front for trafficking babies to wealthy families who don't want to wait for legal adoption." Something shifted in the man's expression, surprise, then calculation. "You think this is about money?" He laughed bitterly. "It's about giving children better lives than they could have with parents who don't want them or can't care for them properly. We create families." "You steal babies," Whitney corrected, disgust evident in her voice. "You drugged Gabriel and left him to die in a hot car." "That wasn't the plan," the fake pastor snapped, his composure cracking. Jack panicked. "We told him to bring the baby to us, not abandon it. We had a family waiting. Good people who would have given that child everything." "Except his mother, who loves him and never gave him up," Whitney countered. The sound of sirens in the distance heralded the approach of backup. The larger man exchanged glances with the pastor, clearly calculating their dwindling options. What no one expected was Sally E.'s contribution to the standoff. From upstairs, the Parrot-ass voice carried clearly through the floorboards, perfectly mimicking the fake pastor-ass voice. "Kill Jack. Leave no evidence. Church money covers all." The color drained from the pastor-ass face at hearing his own incriminating words repeated back to him. The larger man made a desperate move, lunging toward the back of the store. Zach reacted instantly, tackling him to the ground and swiftly handcuffing him. The pastor, seeing his accomplice subdued, raised his hands in surrender, just as police cars flooded the parking lot, their lights painting the store in flashes of blue and red. As the two men were taken into custody, Whitney rushed upstairs to check on Iris and Gabriel. She found them safe, Iris cradling her son with tears of relief streaming down her face. "It's over," Whitney assured her. "They rearrested. They can't hurt Gabriel anymore." Sally, who had been watching from her travel cage, let out a satisfied chirp. "Baby safe now," she declared, with what sounded remarkably like pride. The aftermath unfolded over the following days like scenes from a different life. The Sunset Valley Community Church was revealed to be the hub of an operation that had been trafficking babies to wealthy families for years, charging exorbitant adoption fees that were nothing more than payments for stolen children. Records found at the church led to the recovery of 3 other babies who had been taken from their parents under various pretenses. Iris and Harold Montgomery offered a substantial reward for Sally and Whitney's role in saving Gabriel, but Whitney refused. "Just knowing he is safe is enough," she insisted, though she did accept their offer to help repair and update her aging gas station. Gabriel recovered fully from his ordeal, too young to retain any memory of the trauma he had endured. Iris, determined to protect her son from similar threats in the future, employed security measures at her home, but also made a point of living as normal a life as possible, refusing to let fear dictate their future. As for Whitney and Sally, they became minor celebrities in the region. The story of a parrot who had saved a baby's life captured public imagination, bringing customers from miles around to meet the heroic bird. Sally seemed to enjoy the attention, showing off her vocabulary and intelligence to appreciative audiences. What few people knew was that Sally still occasionally mimicked fragments of that day. Jack's goodbye to Gabriel, the fake pastor's incriminating words, the sounds of a baby crying. But she had added new phrases too. "Gabriel happy," she would announce sometimes, bobbing her head with satisfaction. "Baby safe now." 1 month after the arrests, Iris brought Gabriel to visit Whitney's gas station. The baby had grown noticeably, his cheeks fuller, his eyes brighter and more alert. When introduced to Sally, Gabriel regarded the parrot with fascination, his tiny hands reaching toward colorful feathers. "He is beautiful," Whitney said, watching Gabriel's animated expression as Sally performed a little dance on her perch for him. "Thanks to you," Iris replied softly. "Both of you." She looked at Sally with newfound respect. "I never believed animals could understand so much, could care so deeply about a human child in danger." "Sally is special," Whitney agreed, smiling as the parrot preened under the attention. "She understands things most humans miss. She knew Gabriel needed help before anyone else did." Sally, as if understanding she was being discussed, ruffled her feathers importantly. "Help, baby," she declared. "Family together, good ending." Whitney laughed, but there was a catch in her throat. "Yes, Sally, very good ending." As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting the small gas station in warm golden light, Whitney watched Iris cradling Gabriel, Sally watching over them from her perch, and felt a profound sense of rightness. What had begun as a terrifying day had transformed into something beautiful. A rescued child, a mother and son reunited, criminals brought to justice, and a reminder that sometimes the most important warnings come from the most unexpected sources. And Sally, the extraordinary bird who had set it all in motion, with her desperate cries of "baby, hot car baby," seemed to understand the magnitude of what she had accomplished. She had given voice to the voiceless, had insisted on being heard when it mattered most, and in doing so had saved not just one life but many. "Good bird," Whitney whispered to Sally, stroking her feathers gently. "The very best bird." Sally bobbed her head in acknowledgement, her intelligent eyes reflecting wisdom beyond human understanding. In her own way, she had taught them all that communication crosses all boundaries when compassion leads the way, and that sometimes the most profound truths come from those we least expect to speak them. Outside, life continued. Cars pulling up for gas, travelers stopping for refreshments, the endless flow of people moving through their separate lives. But inside Whitney's gas and grocery, something had fundamentally changed. A parrot, a shopkeeper, a mother, and a baby had become connected by an extraordinary experience, bound together by the universal language of love and protection that transcends species, circumstances, and words themselves. And in the quiet moments when the store was empty, save for Whitney and Sally, The parrot would sometimes look toward the spot where Gabriel had been found and softly say, "Baby safe. All good now." A simple epitaph for a complex journey, spoken by a creature who understood more about human nature than anyone could have imagined. It was enough. It was everything. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.